I'm Mackenzie, 34, and the lakefront property I worked 12 years to afford just became the target of my estranged family's entitlement. After throwing me out at 18 with nothing but what fit in my car, my parents called out of the blue last month demanding I host my golden child brother Ryan's 200-guest wedding. The shock of hearing their voices after 12 years of silence was nothing compared to their audacity. My refusal sparked a war I never asked for. But they had no idea who they were dealing with anymore. I wasn't that desperate to please girl they abandoned. Before I tell you how this all unfolded, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to join our community of survivors who understand that blood doesn't always mean family. Growing up in Westlake, a middle-class suburb outside of Boston, my childhood home looked picture-perfect from the outside. Colonial-style house, neatly trimmed lawn, and a family of 4 that seemed to fit the American dream mold. But inside those walls, a different reality played out every day. From my earliest memories, the contrasts between how my parents treated me versus my younger brother Ryan were impossible to ignore. Ryan was 3 years younger, and from the moment he was born, he became the golden child. Initially, I thought it was just because he was the baby of the family. I was 5 when I first noticed the difference in our birthday celebrations. My parents would host modest parties for me with just family and maybe 1 or 2 friends. For Ryan, they'd rent bouncy castles, hire clowns, and invite half the neighborhood. When I asked my mother why my parties couldn't be like Ryan's, she patted my head and said, "You're more mature, sweetie. You don't need all that fuss." As we grew older, the favoritism became more pronounced. Ryan would bring home C's on his report card and get taken out for ice cream as a reward for trying. Meanwhile, my straight A's were met with a cursory nod and comments like, "That's what we expect from you." My father, James, worked as a bank manager and valued achievement. But somehow this standard only applied to me. My mother, Linda, was a part-time real estate agent who deferred to my father on most family decisions, silently enabling the differential treatment. One Christmas, when I was 12 and Ryan was 9, I'd asked for a microscope, having developed a keen interest in science. Ryan had asked for the latest gaming system. Christmas morning arrived, and Ryan not only got his gaming system, but also a mountain of games and accessories to go with it. I unwrapped my gift to find a science book, not the microscope. When I couldn't hide my disappointment, my father frowned and said, "Those things are expensive, Mackenzie. Maybe if you'd helped more around the house, we could have considered it." Meanwhile, Ryan's gaming setup had cost 3 times what the microscope would have. School events were another battlefield. If I had a choir concert or academic competition, one parent might show up, usually my mother, checking her watch throughout. For Ryan's soccer games, they'd both be there, cheering from the sidelines. My father's voice the loudest among the parents. They'd take Ryan and sometimes his whole team for pizza afterward, while I'd be left to find my own ride home from my events with a teacher or a friend's parent. My achievements piled up through middle school and high school: debate team captain, first chair violin, perfect SAT scores, scholarship offers. Each one was acknowledged with qualified praise. That's nice, but don't get too caught up in that debate stuff. Or, music won't pay the bills, Mackenzie. Meanwhile, Ryan's mediocre performances in sports and academics were celebrated as if he'd won Olympic gold. "Did you see that assist Ryan made? That's my boy," or C+ in math. "That's improvement, champ." The emotional neglect was subtle enough that outsiders didn't notice, but it was constant. I learned to seek validation elsewhere, from teachers who recognized my abilities, from the quiet satisfaction of achieving goals I set for myself. I built a protective shell around my heart, telling myself I didn't need their approval. But deep down, every child needs their parents' love, and that void was impossible to fill completely. My father's criticism was particularly cutting. "Stand up straight, Mackenzie. You look sloppy. That outfit makes you look heavy. Why can't you be more sociable like your brother?" My body, my personality, my choices, all were subject to his disapproval. My mother would occasionally comfort me in private. Your father just wants what's best for you, but she never challenged him directly. By 16, I'd learned to be self-sufficient. I cooked my own meals, washed my own clothes, managed my own schedule. I drove myself to school events in my used car that I'd saved for by tutoring younger students. Ryan, at 13, still had his laundry done, meals prepared, and was chauffeured everywhere by my parents. The dynamic affected my relationship with Ryan too. He wasn't inherently malicious, he was just a product of the environment our parents created. He'd grown up believing he was entitled to preferential treatment. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of guilt in his eyes when he got something I didn't. But it was quickly replaced by the satisfaction of being the favorite. We weren't close, but we weren't enemies either. We existed in separate orbits within the same household. My senior year of high school was when I truly began to see a future beyond my parents' conditional approval. I applied to colleges secretly, not sharing my ambitions with my family. I knew what I wanted: architecture. I'd been designing buildings since I was 12, filling sketchbooks with blueprints and elevations. Architecture combined my love of art, mathematics, and practical problem-solving. It was also a path to financial independence, something I increasingly understood I would need. The acceptances came in spring of my senior year, including one to Cornell's prestigious architecture program with a significant scholarship. I'd need student loans and part-time jobs to cover the rest, but it was doable. For the first time, I felt a sense of hope, a concrete escape plan from the household where I'd always be second best. What I didn't know then was that my acceptance to Cornell would trigger the event that would ultimately sever my relationship with my family. The very achievement that should have made my parents proud would instead lead to the most painful rejection of my life, one that would shape the woman I would become and set the stage for the confrontation 12 years later. The day my acceptance package from Cornell arrived, I couldn't contain my excitement. After years of straight A's, extracurriculars, and pushing myself beyond exhaustion, my dream school had not only accepted me but offered a scholarship covering 75% of my tuition. The thick envelope sat on my lap as I waited for my parents to come home from work. Despite years of disappointment, some naive part of me still believed this achievement would finally earn their approval. My mother arrived first, looking tired after showing houses all day. I showed her the letter with trembling hands. "Cornell," she said, scanning the document. "That's in New York, isn't it? So far away." "No congratulations. Just immediate concern about the distance. It's one of the best architecture programs in the country, Mom," I explained. "And they're giving me a huge scholarship." She nodded distractedly. "Your father will want to talk about the cost. Even with a scholarship, those private schools are expensive." When my father arrived home an hour later, his reaction was even more deflating. "Architecture," he scoffed, barely glancing at the acceptance letter. "That's a male-dominated field, Mackenzie. You'll be competing against men who will always have the advantage. Why not something more suitable, like teaching or nursing?" I'd anticipated this response, having heard variations of it whenever I'd mentioned my interest in architecture. The program director specifically mentioned they're trying to increase female representation in the field, I countered. "And I've always wanted to design buildings. You know that." "What we know is that you've always had unrealistic expectations," my father said, handing the letter back to me. "We'll discuss more practical options this weekend." Ryan, then 15, had been listening from the doorway. "Cornell's like super expensive," he commented. "That money could be saved for my college fund instead." My father nodded approvingly at Ryan. "Your brother has a point. We need to think about the family as a whole." I bit back tears of frustration. This moment of achievement, which should have been celebrated, had instead become another example of how my dreams didn't matter. I went in my room and closed the door, determined more than ever to attend Cornell, with or without their blessing. The next few weeks were tense. I researched additional scholarships and student loan options, making plans that didn't require my parents' financial support. I began selling some of my belongings on eBay, books, clothes I'd outgrown, my violin, to build a small nest egg. 3 weeks after my acceptance, I came home from my after-school job to find my parents and Ryan in the living room, faces grim. My father held an envelope, my bank statement. "Sit down," he commanded. I sat, confused by the formal atmosphere. Ryan noticed cash missing from his drawer. My father began. $200 he'd been saving from his birthday and Christmas. I looked at Ryan, who avoided my eyes. I didn't take anything from Ryan's room. Then explain this. My father pushed the bank statement toward me. A deposit of $200 last Tuesday. I felt a chill run through me. That's from selling my violin on eBay. I can show you the payment confirmation. Convenient excuse, my father said. Ryan says he counted his money last Monday, and it was gone Tuesday. The timing matches perfectly. Check my eBay account, I insisted. The buyer paid $215. eBay took their fee. And I deposited $203.47. That's exactly what's on the statement. Why would you sell your violin? My mother asked. We paid for all those lessons. Because I need money for college. I said. For Cornell. Since you made it clear you won't help me. My father's face darkened. So you admit you're desperate for money. I'm not desperate, I said. I'm determined. There's a difference. Ryan finally spoke up. I saw her in my room last week. She was probably checking where I keep my money. The blatant lie stunned me. That's not true. I haven't been in your room in months. Ryan wouldn't lie about this, my mother said softly. 12 years of suppressed resentment suddenly boiled over. Are you serious? Ryan lies all the time. Remember when he said Coach Bennett let him skip practice and you found out he was at the mall? Or when he swore he didn't break Mrs. Abernathy's window? And she had him on her security camera? But sure, believe him over me. You always do. My father stood up, his face flushed with anger. Don't you dare speak about your brother that way. He's not the one planning to abandon his family for some fancy college. Abandon my family? I laughed bitterly. What family? You've never treated me like I belong here. Nothing I do is ever good enough. Ryan gets celebrated for breathing, while I could win a Nobel Prize and you'd ask why it wasn't too. That's not true, my mother protested weakly. It is true, I said, years of hurt pouring out. You know it is. You've never stood up for me, not once. You let him treat me like I'm nothing. My father pointed at me, voice shaking with rage. You ungrateful little. After everything we've done for you. What have you done for me? I demanded. Ryan gets new clothes, I get hand-me-downs. Ryan gets expensive gaming systems, I get books from the library. Ryan gets driven to every event, I find my own rides. Tell me exactly what I should be grateful for? For putting a roof over your head and food on your plate, my father shouted. For the ungrateful 18 years you've been a burden on this family. The word burden hit me like a physical blow. In that moment, something broke inside me, the last thread of hope that they might someday love me the way they loved Ryan. My father continued, either admit what you did and apologize to your brother, or get out of this house. I looked at Ryan, who had the decency to look uncomfortable but remained silent. I looked at my mother, who stared at the floor, unwilling to meet my eyes. I looked at my father, red-faced and unyielding. I didn't take Ryan's money, I said quietly, but I will get out of this house. Right now. I walked upstairs with as much dignity as I could muster. I grabbed the duffel bag I'd already started packing for college and filled it with essentials, clothes, toiletries, my laptop. I took the cash I'd hidden inside an old teddy bear, about $600 saved from my part-time job. I grabbed my important documents, birth certificate, social security card, passport, which I'd had the foresight to collect in a folder months ago. As I came downstairs with my bag, my mother finally spoke up. "Mackenzie, don't be hasty. Your father is just upset." "No," I said. "This was always coming. I'm just sorry I waited so long." My father stood by the door, arms crossed. "Once you walk out that door, don't expect to come crawling back." I looked him directly in the eye. "I won't." As I walked to my car, the used Honda Civic I'd bought with my own money, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Ryan. "Mac, he started. "Save it," I cut him off. "You know what you did. I hope it was worth it." I drove away from my childhood home with tears streaming down my face, but a strange sense of freedom growing in my chest. I had no idea where I would sleep that night, or how I would manage until college started in the fall. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was choosing my own path, unburdened by the weight of trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it freely. What I didn't realize then was that this painful exodus would be the beginning of my true life, one built on my terms, leading eventually to achievements my parents couldn't have imagined, and to the beautiful lakefront home that would, years later, become the battleground for our final confrontation. That first night of freedom was also my first taste of true hardship. I parked in a Walmart lot, reclined my seat, and tried to sleep while questions about my future swirled through my mind. By morning, I had formulated a plan. I called Jessica, my debate team partner whose family had always been kind to me, and explained my situation in the vaguest terms possible. Her parents offered their guest room until college started, refusing any payment beyond help with household chores. The next few months were a crash course in adult responsibility. I confirmed my acceptance to Cornell, finalized my financial aid package, and took on additional shifts at the local coffee shop to build my savings. I also reached out to Cornell's housing office to explain my circumstances, and they connected me with summer housing options and an early move-in date. My parents made no attempt to contact me. Ryan texted once, a vague "sorry things got crazy," which I left unanswered. The lack of effort to make amends confirmed what I'd always known but tried to deny. I wasn't a priority in their lives. Arriving at Cornell that August, I felt both terrified and exhilarated. My dorm room was tiny, but it was mine, a space where no one would belittle my achievements or make me feel unwelcome. Orientation week introduced me to fellow architecture students who shared my passion. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who found my enthusiasm for building design interesting rather than odd. I quickly established a rigorous routine. Classes and studio work consumed most of my days. Evenings and weekends were split between studying and my campus jobs, working at the architecture library and serving as a resident advisor, which covered my housing costs. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't often afford, but the exhaustion felt different from the emotional fatigue I'd known at home. This was productive tiredness, each day bringing me closer to my goals. My freshman year roommate, Tara, became my first true friend at Cornell. A civil engineering major with a boisterous laugh and zero tolerance for self-pity. She dragged me out of the studio when I'd been working too long and introduced me to her wide circle of friends. "You need people, Mackenzie," she'd insist. "Buildings don't hug back." Through Tara, I met Diego, a graduate student in urban planning who later became my boyfriend for most of college. Diego's large, affectionate family included me in their holidays, showing me what healthy family dynamics looked like. Though our relationship eventually ended amicably when he took a job in California, the experience of being valued and respected in a relationship healed something broken inside me. The architecture program was as demanding as its reputation suggested. Projects often required all-nighters and critiques could be brutal. Where some of my classmates crumbled under the pressure, I thrived. Years of withstanding my father's criticism had given me a thick skin, and I'd long ago learned to separate constructive feedback from personal attacks. My professors noticed this resilience, and by junior year, I was selected for a competitive internship at a prestigious Boston firm. Returning to Boston meant risking an encounter with my family. But the opportunity was too valuable to pass up. I rented a room in a shabby apartment with 3 other interns and threw myself into the work. The firm specialized in sustainable urban development, and I absorbed everything I could about green building practices and community-centered design. My supervisor, Eleanor Hamilton, became a mentor and the closest thing to a parent figure I'd had since leaving home. In her 60s with steel gray hair and formidable intelligence, Eleanor had broken barriers as one of the few women in architecture in the 1980s. "This field will try to tell you that you don't belong," she told me. "Your job is to prove them wrong every single day." Under Eleanor's guidance, I contributed to several significant projects and made connections throughout the industry. When she offered me a full-time position after graduation, I accepted without hesitation. My starting salary was modest by Boston standards, but after years of financial precarity, it felt like wealth. My first apartment was a studio the size of a large closet, with a temperamental radiator and a shower that ran cold after 5 minutes. I furnished it with thrift store finds and spent most of my time at the office anyway, taking on additional projects and learning everything I could about the business side of architecture. 3 years of living frugally and investing aggressively in my retirement accounts gave me enough for a down payment on a small condo in an up-and-coming neighborhood. The condo needed significant renovations, which I designed myself and executed with help from contractor friends I'd met through work. The before and after transformation caught the attention of a local design blog, leading to small residential commissions I completed on nights and weekends. These side projects evolved into Mackenzie Hayes Design, my own boutique firm specializing in sustainable residential architecture. Eleanor supported my entrepreneurial venture while keeping me on part-time at her firm until my business was stable enough to sustain me. By age 28, I was financially secure and professionally respected, with a growing portfolio of projects and a small but dedicated team working under me. The emotional scars of my childhood didn't disappear with professional success. I struggled with trust issues and periodically battled imposter syndrome despite concrete evidence of my abilities. Therapy helped, as did the circle of loyal friends I'd gathered, people who knew my story and loved me anyway. My parents made sporadic attempts to contact me during those years. A Christmas card with no personal message, a text when my grandfather died. I responded with minimal politeness but maintained firm boundaries. Ryan reached out more persistently after he graduated college, sending emails about his life and asking about mine. I answered occasionally, but kept him at arm's length, unwilling to risk being hurt again. At 30, I achieved a long-held dream, purchasing waterfront property about an hour outside Boston. The existing house was architecturally unremarkable but situated on 3 acres with 200 feet of lake frontage and stunning views. Over the next 2 years, I transformed it into my personal masterpiece, an environmentally conscious home that blended harmoniously with its natural surroundings. Every detail reflected my aesthetic and values: open spaces filled with natural light, local sustainable materials, energy-efficient systems hidden within beautiful design elements. The great room featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, with a massive stone fireplace and exposed beams reclaimed from a 19th-century barn. The kitchen combined professional-grade functionality with warm, inviting details. For bedrooms and a dedicated office meant plenty of space for friends to visit and for me to work from home when projects allowed. The lakefront property became my sanctuary and my pride. I created it entirely on my own terms, funded by my own success, designed with my own vision. It represented everything I'd accomplished since walking out of my parents' house with nothing but a duffel bag and determination. I'd finally built a life that felt authentically mine, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was rather than measuring me against impossible standards. I'd proven to myself that I didn't need my family's approval or support to thrive. I was happy, successful, and at peace with my decision to keep my parents and Ryan at a distance. Then came the phone call that shattered my carefully constructed tranquility and forced me to confront the family wounds I'd thought were long healed. 12 years after being thrown out. My parents wanted back into my life, not to make amends, but to use the home I'd created through my own hard work as a backdrop for celebrating their golden child. It was a Tuesday afternoon in April when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I'd let unknown calls go to voicemail, but I was expecting a call from a potential client, so I answered. Hello, Mackenzie Hayes speaking. There was a brief pause before a voice I hadn't heard in 12 years responded, Mackenzie? It's your mother. My hand tightened around the phone as a surge of adrenaline shot through my body. 12 years of carefully maintained distance collapsed in an instant. I stood from my desk and walked to the window overlooking the lake, trying to ground myself in the present as the past came rushing back. How did you get this number? I managed to ask, my voice steadier than I felt. Your cousin Andrea mentioned you two reconnected at a conference last year. She thought it was time we talked. My mother's voice had aged, carrying a wavering quality I didn't remember. Mental note: remove Andrea from my contact list. The Architectural Sustainability Conference had seemed safe territory, far from family entanglements. Clearly, I'd been wrong. What do you want? I asked directly, unwilling to engage in small talk as if we were casual acquaintances. I wanted to check on you. See how you're doing. She attempted a light tone. Andrea mentioned you have your own firm now. And a beautiful home. Of course. Andrea hadn't just provided my phone number, she'd shared details about my life. I felt a fresh wave of betrayal. I'm doing well, I said neutrally. Is that all? Another pause. Actually, there's something else. Ryan is getting married in June. An unexpected pang hit me at this news. Despite everything, part of me still cared about my brother's life milestones. Congratulations to him, I said, meaning it despite my reservations. Yes, we're very excited. He's marrying Melissa Thornton. Her father is Gerald Thornton of Thornton Development. The name was familiar, a major commercial real estate developer in the Northeast. Apparently, Ryan had managed to align himself with wealth and connections. That's nice, I replied, waiting for the real purpose of this call. My mother wouldn't have broken 12 years of silence just to share wedding news. The thing is, she continued, her voice taking on a wheedling quality I remembered all too well, they were planning to hold the wedding at the Thornton estate in the Berkshires, but there's been a terrible issue with black mold. They discovered it during renovations, and the entire main house is uninhabitable. I remained silent, already seeing where this was heading but unwilling to make it easier for her. The wedding is in 6 weeks and they've lost their venue. All the suitable alternatives are booked. We've been in quite a panic until Andrea showed us pictures of your lake house. There it was. I closed my eyes, disbelief mixing with a bitter sense of recognition. 12 years without a word, and the first contact was to use my home for Ryan's wedding. No, I said simply. Mackenzie, please, just hear me out. It would be for one weekend in June. The Thorntons are covering all expenses. Your house is perfect. The lake view, the large property. They're planning for about 200 guests. 200 guests? I repeated incredulously. At my private home? Absolutely not. This is your brother's wedding, my mother pressed. Family should help family in times of need. The hypocrisy was so staggering I almost laughed. Family? I echoed. You threw me out with nowhere to go. Dad called me a burden. You both chose to believe Ryan's lies over the truth. And now you want to call on family obligation. That was a long time ago, she said dismissively. People make mistakes. We were under a lot of stress with your father's job situation. This was news to me. What job situation? He was facing a potential layoff. It didn't happen, but the threat was there. We were not at our best. Even if true, it was no excuse for abandoning their daughter. I'm sorry to hear that, but it doesn't change what happened. Mackenzie, the past is the past. This is about Ryan's future. Surely you don't want to ruin his special day because of old grievances. Classic manipulation, framing my boundaries as petty revenge. I'm not ruining anything. The Thorntons are wealthy. They can find another venue. The invitations have already gone out, she continued as if I hadn't spoken. With the short notice, they had to move quickly. The Thorntons' country club was available but could only accommodate half the guest list. It wasn't suitable. A cold realization dawned on me. Wait, what address is on the invitations? My mother's hesitation told me everything. You put my address on the wedding invitations without asking me, I demanded, anger rising in my chest. Gerald Thornton handled that part. He's very decisive. Once Andrea showed him pictures of your property, he was set on it. These are important people, Mackenzie. Ryan's future in-laws have connections that could benefit the whole family. I don't need their connections, I said coldly. And my home is not available. Your father wants to speak with you, she said, and before I could object, his voice came on the line. Mackenzie. His tone held none of my mother's wheedling quality, just the authoritative command I remembered. This wedding is happening at your house. The Thorntons are not people who take no for an answer. And neither am I. 12 years melted away, and for a moment I was 18 again, standing in their living room as he ordered me to apologize or leave. But I wasn't that girl anymore. My answer is no, I stated firmly. My home is not available for Ryan's wedding or any other family event. Do not come here. Do not send guests here. If anyone shows up on my property uninvited, I will have them removed for trespassing. You ungrateful, he began, but I cut him off. I have nothing to be grateful to you for. Do not contact me again. You'll regret this, he said, voice low and threatening. The Thorntons don't appreciate being inconvenienced, and neither do I. This isn't over. Yes, it is, I said, and ended the call. I stood staring at the lake, hands shaking with adrenaline and anger. The audacity was breathtaking. After 12 years of silence, they hadn't called to apologize, to make amends, or even to simply reconnect. They'd called to use me and my home, still treating me as an accessory to Ryan's life rather than a person with my own agency. Within minutes, my phone began buzzing with texts and calls. My Aunt Karen, 2 cousins, even my grandmother, all suddenly eager to reconnect and, coincidentally, discuss Ryan's wedding. I silenced my phone and poured myself a glass of wine, trying to process what had just happened. Part of me wanted to believe this could be an opportunity for reconciliation, for healing old wounds. But the conversation had made it painfully clear that nothing had changed. They still saw me as a means to an end, still prioritized Ryan's needs above all else, still expected me to fall in line with their demands. I didn't sleep that night, haunted by my father's parting words. This isn't over. I knew him well enough to recognize a threat when I heard one. The question was, what would he do next? And more importantly, how would I respond when he did? The day after my parents' call, the barrage began. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from extended family members I hadn't spoken to in years. Aunt Karen, family should come first, Mackenzie. Uncle Steve, after everything your parents did for you. Cousin Beth, Ryan was always there for you growing up. Each message rewrote history, painting me as the ungrateful daughter denying a simple favor to the family who had supposedly sacrificed so much for me. I blocked numbers systematically, but they found other ways to reach me. Email, LinkedIn messages, even handwritten letters delivered to my office. The coordinated pressure campaign was impressive in its thoroughness. 3 days after the initial call, my assistant, Leah, forwarded an email from Melissa Thornton, Ryan's fiancée whom I'd never met. The subject line read, Lake House Wedding Plans. The email opened with a brief, impersonal introduction before launching into detailed requests, where they planned to set up the tent on my lawn, which rooms they would use for the bridal party's preparation, when their event planner could tour the property. Not once did it acknowledge that I hadn't agreed to host the event. It closed with, "My father's assistant will contact you about compensation for any inconvenience." I drafted a professional but firm response. "Ms. Thornton, I understand there's been a miscommunication. My property is not available as a wedding venue. I have not given permission for any event to be held at my home, nor will I. Please make alternative arrangements immediately. Mackenzie Hayes." Her reply came within minutes. "I understand you and Ryan have some old sibling issues, but surely we can move past that for one special day? Daddy is prepared to be quite generous. Name your price. Name your price." As if my boundaries were merely an opening negotiation tactic. As if my home, my sanctuary, was just another commodity to be purchased by people accustomed to buying whatever they wanted. I didn't respond. Instead, I called my friend Marcus, who happened to be a real estate attorney. "They can't legally use your property without permission," he assured me after I explained the situation. But entitled people often ignore legal niceties. Document everything, save all communications, and consider sending a formal cease and desist letter. I followed his advice, having my lawyer send letters to my parents, Ryan and Melissa and Gerald Thornton, explicitly prohibiting them from using my property for any purpose and warning of legal consequences if they trespassed. The next day, I received a call from an unknown number. Warily, I answered. "Mackenzie Hayes." A man's voice, brusque and accustomed to authority. "Yes, speaking. Gerald Thornton here. Got your lawyer's little note. Quite unnecessary. We can resolve this like adults." I took a deep breath. "Mr. Thornton, my property is not available for your daughter's wedding. That's not negotiable." He chuckled, the sound entirely without humor. "Everything's negotiable. Listen, I understand family dynamics can be complicated. Your brother filled me in on some of your history. But this wedding is important to my princess. The invitations are sent. The plans are made. Plans you made without my consent," I pointed out. "Water under the bridge," he dismissed. "I'm prepared to offer $50,000 for one weekend use of your property. That's generous by any standard." The sum was substantial, but it wasn't about money. "I'm not interested." $100,000, he countered immediately. "Final offer. Mr. Thornton, this isn't a negotiation. My home is not for rent at any price." His tone changed, warmth giving way to steel. "Ms. Hayes, perhaps you don't understand who you're dealing with. I've developed half the commercial properties in New England. Your little architecture firm could benefit greatly from a relationship with Thornton Development, or suffer from lack of one." A threat, thinly veiled. "Are you threatening my business because I won't host your daughter's wedding?" "I'm explaining realities," he said smoothly. "This wedding is happening at your lake house in 6 weeks. You can accept my generous offer and be part of a joyous family occasion, or you can continue this pointless obstinance and face the consequences. Your choice." He hung up before I could respond. I sat at my desk, seething. The entitlement was staggering, treating my hard-earned property as if it were community property they had a right to use, threatening my livelihood when I refused to comply. This was no longer just about a wedding. It was about power and control. That evening, a text came from a number I didn't recognize. "It's Ryan. Can we talk?" After a moment's hesitation, I responded, "What is there to say?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Finally, "I didn't know they would pressure you like this. It wasn't my idea." "But you're not stopping it either," I pointed out. "Melissa has her heart set on a lakefront wedding. When her dad saw Andrea's photos of your place, he decided it was perfect. You know how it is when rich people want something." "No, Ryan, I don't know. Because when rich people want to use something I own, I expect them to ask permission, not make demands and threats. Gerald's just used to getting his way. He's actually a good guy. A good guy who threatened my business because I won't let him use my home without permission. Another long pause. He did what? Mac, I swear I didn't know about that. For a moment, I almost believed him. Then I remembered all the times he'd played innocent while benefiting from situations that hurt me. It doesn't matter, I texted back. The answer is still no. Find another venue. Can we at least talk in person? Coffee somewhere neutral. I considered it briefly. Part of me was curious to see the adult version of my brother. To find out if he'd grown beyond the entitled golden child. But another part, the self-protective part that had gotten me through the past 12 years, recognized the risk of being manipulated. Not a good time, I replied. I have deadlines. Mac, please. I just want to reconnect with my sister. Funny how you want to reconnect 6 weeks before your wedding. Right after your venue fell through. 12 years of minimal contact, and suddenly I'm important? No thanks. He didn't respond for several hours. Then, I deserve that. But for what it's worth. I'm sorry about everything that happened. I was a stupid kid. The apology, though vague, caught me off guard. It was more acknowledgement than I'd ever gotten from my parents. Still, timing made it suspect. I appreciate that, I replied cautiously. But my answer about the wedding isn't changing. I understand, he texted back. Take care, Mac. 3 days later. Jessica, a former college roommate who still lived in my hometown, called with disturbing news. Mackenzie, I think you should know something. Your mother approached me after yoga class asking for my help surprising you. She wanted details about your daily schedule, when you're typically home, when you travel. It felt off. My stomach clenched. What did you tell her? Nothing specific, obviously. I said I didn't know your current schedule, but Mac, the way she was talking, it sounded like they're planning to show up at your place regardless of what you've said. That evening, I checked the wedding website Andrea had mentioned. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Under venue, it listed my full address with a description of the family lake estate and professional photos of my property, images pulled from a home design magazine that had featured my renovation last year. I scrolled through the site with growing horror. They had planned everything: ceremony on the lawn overlooking the lake, cocktail hour on the terrace, reception under a tent beside the garden. They even included details about guest accommodations at nearby hotels and transportation arrangements from those hotels to my home. This wasn't just presumptuous. It was a coordinated plan to force my hand. They intended to arrive with 200 guests, vendors, and decorators, creating a situation where turning them away would cause a scene. They were counting on my discomfort with public confrontation to make me acquiesce. I called Marcus again, explaining the escalating situation. This is approaching criminal territory, he said grimly. Intentional trespassing, potential property damage. You need to document everything and alert local authorities. You think I should call the police on my own family? The idea was simultaneously horrifying and satisfying. I think you should protect yourself from people who have demonstrated they don't respect your boundaries, Marcus replied. These aren't the actions of family who care about you, Mackenzie. These are the actions of people willing to steamroll you to get what they want. That night, I made a decision. I would not be bullied, manipulated, or coerced into surrendering my home. I would not relive the powerlessness of my childhood by allowing my parents and Ryan to override my explicit refusal. This was my property, earned through my hard work, and I would defend it. The question was, how? Simply refusing entry when they arrived would create a chaotic confrontation with hundreds of witnesses. Involving the police would generate gossip and potentially damage my professional reputation in a field where connections mattered. I needed a strategy that would prevent the wedding from happening at my home while minimizing drama and protecting my interests. As I sat on my deck, watching the sunset over the lake, a plan began to take shape. One that would require careful timing, legal precautions, and the help of friends I trusted completely. They thought they knew me, the compliant daughter who could be pressured into submission. They thought my lakefront property was just another stage for Ryan's golden child narrative. They had no idea who they were dealing with now, or what I was capable of when pushed too far. For the first time since receiving my mother's call, I smiled. Let them come. I would be ready. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with my closest friends, people who had been my true family over the past 12 years. Tara flew in from Chicago, where she now worked as a structural engineer. Diego, in Boston for an urban planning conference, rearranged his schedule to join us. Marcus brought his legal expertise, while Eleanor, my mentor, provided the wisdom of experience. Jessica drove up from my hometown, bringing valuable intelligence about my family's movements. I laid out everything that had happened and my growing certainty that my family intended to force the wedding at my home regardless of my objections. They're counting on social pressure, I explained. 200 guests, vendors, the whole wedding party showing up. They think I won't cause a scene by turning everyone away. That's breathtakingly entitled, Tara said, shaking her head. Even for people who sound as narcissistic as your parents. The Thorntons are used to getting their way, Marcus added. I've dealt with Gerald in professional contexts. He's the type who sees resistance as a personal affront. So, what are our options? Diego asked, always the practical strategist. Marcus outlined the legal considerations. You've already sent cease and desist letters, which establishes that they've been formally notified not to enter your property. If they show up anyway, it's cleared trespassing. But having the police remove 200 wedding guests would be messy and potentially traumatic. Not to mention the professional blowback, Eleanor pointed out. Architecture is relationship-driven. A public scene involving police and wealthy clients could have repercussions. What if I'm not here when they arrive? I suggested. The plan that had been forming in my mind, taking clearer shape. What if no one is here? Tara's eyes lit up with understanding. You're thinking of being elsewhere on the wedding day. I nodded. Specifically, I'm thinking of being in Barbados. A vacation during the crisis. Jessica looked confused. Not just a vacation, I clarified. A strategic absence. If I'm not here, they can't create a situation where I'm forced to either allow the wedding or cause a scene. And if the house is properly secured and monitored. You'd need documentation of everything, Marcus said, following my logic. Security cameras, timestamps. And a property management company with clear instructions, Eleanor added. Someone to act as your legal representative in your absence. Diego grinned. It's elegant. They arrive with their entourage, only to find locked gates, security notices, and no way to pressure you in person. But they might still try to break in, Jessica warned. Your mother has been asking around town about your schedule, trying to find out when you typically travel. That's why we need multiple layers of protection, I agreed. Legal, physical, and technological. Over the next few hours, we developed a comprehensive plan. Marcus would handle the legal aspects, drafting official notices and coordinating with local authorities. Tara, with her engineering background, would oversee security enhancements to the property. Diego volunteered to research the best security systems and monitoring services. Eleanor would use her considerable influence to mitigate any professional fallout. Jessica would continue monitoring the situation in my hometown, reporting any relevant intelligence. The following week was a flurry of activity. I hired a top-rated property management company with experience handling high-end vacation homes. They would serve as my local representative, authorized to call authorities if anyone attempted to access the property without permission. I had them change all exterior locks and install a sophisticated gate system at the entrance to my driveway. A security firm installed comprehensive surveillance coverage, cameras monitoring every approach to the house, the lakefront, and key interior spaces. The system would record continuously and send alerts to both my phone and the property management company if it detected unexpected activity. Marcus prepared a final set of legal notifications. 1. A letter to my parents, Ryan and Melissa, and the Thorntons, explicitly prohibiting them from entering my property for any purpose. 2. A notice to the local police department, informing them of the potential trespassing situation and requesting drive by monitoring on the wedding date. 3. A letter to the wedding planner listed on the website, warning of legal liability if they facilitated trespassing. 4. Notifications to the vendors listed on the wedding website, caterer, florist, photographer, etc., informing them that the venue was not authorized and they would be trespassing if they entered the property. These documents were sent via certified mail, requiring signature confirmation, creating an unambiguous paper trail showing all parties had been notified. Tara supervised the installation of physical deterrents, nothing aggressive or dangerous, but clear barriers to unauthorized entry. The new gate at the driveway entrance featured prominent "No Trespassing" and "Private Property" signs. Similar notices were posted along the property boundaries, including the lakefront approach. Meanwhile, I booked a 10-day trip to Barbados, strategically scheduled to begin 3 days before the wedding date and extend until a week after. I invited Tara and Diego to join me, partly for moral support, partly to ensure I had witnesses to my whereabouts during the critical period. 2 weeks before the wedding date, an unexpected email arrived from Melissa Thornton. Mackenzie, it has come to my attention that there may have been a significant misunderstanding regarding our wedding plans. My father can be forceful in his approach to problems, and I fear this has created unnecessary tension. While your lakefront property would have been lovely, we have secured an alternative venue at the Oceanside Resort in Cape Cod. I apologize for any stress this situation has caused. Best regards, Melissa Thornton. I forwarded the email to Marcus, who called immediately. Don't trust this, he warned. It could be legitimate. They've realized you won't back down and found another venue. Or it could be a tactic to make you lower your guard. You think they'd say they've changed venues, but still plan to show up here. The level of deception seemed extreme, even for my family. I've seen stranger things in family disputes, Marcus said. The amount of money they've invested in planning this wedding at your property, the invitations, the arrangements, makes it unlikely they'd abandon the plan so easily, especially given Gerald Thornton's reputation. I agreed to maintain all our security measures as planned. Jessica confirmed my suspicions the next day. Your mother is still telling people the wedding will be at your lake house. She was at the salon yesterday talking about the flower delivery schedule. A check of the wedding website showed it had been made private, password protected, not removed or updated with a new venue. The pieces didn't add up. The final confirmation came 3 days later when the property management company called to report that someone claiming to be the wedding planner had come by to confirm measurements for tent placement. They had turned her away as instructed, but her appearance contradicted Melissa's email about changing venues. They're still planning to use your property, Tara concluded when I shared this news. They're just trying to catch you off guard. Or they're hedging their bets, Diego suggested. Perhaps they have secured a backup venue but still prefer yours. They might be planning to try your place first, then fall back to the alternative if they can't get in. With this information, we finalized our plans. I prepared my home for my extended absence, securing valuables and removing personal items from areas shown on the wedding website. I left instructions with the property management company to document any attempted entry and to contact authorities immediately if anyone tried to access the property. The day before my departure for Barbados, I received a text from Ryan. Mac, can we talk before you leave town? Just coffee, I promise. How did he know I was leaving town? The information leak was concerning but not entirely surprising. Small towns had gossip networks, and despite my precautions, my travel plans might have become known. Not possible with my current schedule, I replied. If you want to talk, we can set something up after I return. Please, Mac. I need to explain some things. Not about the wedding. That's been handled. Just family stuff. Part of me was curious, but the larger part remained wary of manipulation. When I get back, I repeated, I'll let you know when I'm available. It might be too late by then, he texted cryptically. I didn't respond. Whatever family drama he wanted to discuss could wait until after I'd ensured my property was protected. The following morning, I boarded a flight to Barbados with Tara and Diego, leaving behind a home fortified against intruders and equipped to document any attempted violation. As the plane took off, I felt a mixture of anxiety and resolve. I had done everything possible to protect my boundaries and my property. Now it was a waiting game. What I didn't anticipate was how liberating it would feel to take active control of the situation rather than merely reacting to my family's manipulations. For the first time since that unexpected phone call, I felt powerful rather than victimized. Whatever happened on the planned wedding day, I had refused to be bullied into submission. I had stood my ground and protected what was mine. The Caribbean sun, warm sand, and company of true friends would be a healing counterpoint to the stress of recent weeks. And thanks to modern technology, I would witness in real time whatever unfolded at my lakefront property, safe from pressure, manipulation, and the guilt trips that had controlled me for so much of my childhood. Let them come, I thought as the Massachusetts coastline disappeared below the clouds. Let them come and find nothing but locked gates, security cameras, and the consequences of their own entitlement. The morning of Ryan's planned wedding dawned clear and perfect in Barbados. I awoke to gentle ocean breezes drifting through the windows of our beachfront villa, a stark contrast to the tension knotting my stomach. Today was the day my family would discover the consequences of disregarding my boundaries. Tara and Diego had arranged a beachside breakfast on our private terrace, fresh fruit, local pastries, and strong coffee, but I found myself checking my phone every few minutes, waiting for notifications from my home security system. Try to relax, Diego urged, refilling my coffee cup. The property management company is on alert. Everything is handled. I know, I said, setting down my phone with deliberate effort. It's just hard to fully disconnect knowing what might be happening. Whatever happens, you've done everything right, Tara reminded me. You sent legal notices. You made your position clear. If they still try something, that's on them, not you. I nodded, grateful for their unwavering support. We spent the morning swimming in the crystal-clear Caribbean water, trying to distract ourselves from the confrontation likely unfolding back in Massachusetts. At precisely 11:43 a.m. to 12:43 p.m. Eastern Time, when the wedding was scheduled to begin, my phone erupted with security alerts. I hesitated only briefly before opening the live feed from my home cameras. The scene was exactly as we'd anticipated. A convoy of vehicles lined my driveway, luxury cars, a florist's van, catering trucks, and at least 3 buses presumably carrying guests. My parents stood at the locked gate with a man I recognized from photos as Gerald Thornton, gesturing angrily at the property manager who had positioned herself on the other side. We watched, transfixed, as the drama unfolded in real time. Though there was no audio, the body language told the story clearly enough. My father pointed repeatedly at the house, his face reddening with each gesture. Gerald Thornton pulled out his phone, presumably making calls to try to override the situation. My mother stood with her hands clasped anxiously, glancing back at the growing crowd of confused guests emerging from the buses. Ryan and Melissa arrived in a black SUV, him in a tuxedo and her in what appeared to be a bridal dressing gown rather than her full wedding dress. Ryan approached the gate, speaking with the property manager for several minutes before turning back to the group with a defeated expression. They really thought they could just show up with 200 people and take over your home, Diego said, shaking his head in disbelief. They've never respected my boundaries, I replied, watching as Gerald Thornton now appeared to be shouting at the property manager. Why start now? The property manager remained admirably composed, occasionally pointing to the legal notices posted prominently on the gate. Eventually, she stepped back and made a call of her own. Within 15 minutes, 2 police cruisers arrived. The officers spoke briefly with the property manager, reviewed the documentation she provided, then approached my father and Gerald Thornton. What followed was clearly a heated exchange, with Gerald gesturing expansively while one officer firmly shook his head. The second officer began directing the vendors to move their vehicles, which were blocking the rural road. Guests were reboarding the buses, many looking confused and annoyed. I caught glimpses of Melissa in tears, being comforted by an older woman who must have been her mother. Ryan stood apart from the group, staring at the house with an unreadable expression. "Your mother is filming the house with her phone," Tara noted. "Probably still trying to figure out if you're inside." "Little does she know I'm watching her from a beach in Barbados," I said, feeling a strange mix of vindication and sadness. After about 45 minutes of chaos, the entire wedding party began to disperse. The vendors packed up their partially unloaded equipment. The guests returned to their buses. My parents, the Thorntons, Ryan, and Melissa engaged in what appeared to be a tense discussion before also departing. Just as the last vehicle pulled away, my phone rang with a call from the property manager. "Ms. Hayes, I wanted to update you immediately. The situation has been resolved without incident." "I saw on the cameras," I told her. "Thank you for handling everything so professionally." The police were very supportive once I showed them your documentation. Mr. Thornton threatened legal action, but the officers informed him that he was the one facing potential charges for attempted trespassing after receiving explicit notice not to enter the property. "Did anyone try to force entry?" "No, though your father suggested breaking a window." The police officer overheard and warned him that would escalate the situation from trespassing to breaking and entering. I thanked her again for her handling of the situation and ended the call, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. They had come, they had tried, and they had failed. My boundaries had held. "I can't believe they actually showed up with the entire wedding party," Tara said, incredulous. "I can," I replied. "They've always believed they could steamroll me if they applied enough pressure." "Well, not anymore," Diego said, raising his mimosa in a toast. "To boundaries firmly maintained." We clinked glasses, and I allowed myself to truly relax for the first time in weeks. The immediate crisis had passed, and I had prevailed. 2 days later, my lawyer forwarded an email from Gerald Thornton's attorney, demanding compensation for wedding expenses wasted due to your client's last-minute venue cancellation. Marcus had responded with our full documentation trail, including the multiple notices sent weeks in advance explicitly prohibiting use of the property. The Thornton legal team had not replied. I expected angry messages from my parents, but none came. Instead, 5 days after the wedding that wasn't, I received an unexpected email from an address I didn't recognize. "Ms. Hayes, we haven't met, though we almost did under unfortunate circumstances. I'm Catherine Thornton, Melissa's mother. I feel compelled to reach out following the events of last weekend. While I won't pretend to understand the full history between you and your family, I want you to know that many of us were misled about the wedding venue situation. Gerald and your parents told us you had enthusiastically offered your beautiful home for the wedding, but needed to be away that weekend due to an unmovable business commitment. They described it as your generous gift to your brother. Most guests, myself included, had no idea you had explicitly refused permission for the event. The truth emerged during the chaos at your gate. I was standing close enough to hear the property manager explain to the police that you had sent multiple legal notices prohibiting the use of your property. When confronted with this information, your father admitted they had proceeded despite your refusal, believing you would come around or be unable to prevent the wedding once everyone arrived. Melissa was devastated, not just by the venue disaster, but by the deception. She had been told repeatedly that everything was arranged with your blessing. The wedding has been postponed indefinitely while she reconsiders whether Ryan is truly the partner she thought he was. His willingness to participate in such a scheme has raised serious questions about his character and judgment. I want to apologize for my family's role in this situation. Gerald can be overwhelming and used to getting his way, but this crossed lines that should never be crossed. If you're willing, I'd like to speak with you directly when you return. No pressure. Just an opportunity to clear the air between our families. Respectfully, Catherine Thornton. I read the email twice, then forwarded it to Tara and Diego, who were out exploring the island markets. They returned to the villa an hour later, having read Catherine's message. Do you believe her? Tara asked as she unpacked handcrafted souvenirs. I'm inclined to, I admitted. Her version aligns with what we already knew, and she has nothing to gain by reaching out to me now. It's interesting that the wedding is postponed, indefinitely, Diego noted. Sounds like this exposed deeper issues between Ryan and Melissa. Actions have consequences, I said, feeling no satisfaction in my brother's relationship troubles, but recognizing the natural result of his choices. 2 days before our scheduled return to the States, I received another unexpected message, this one from Ryan. Sent through social media since I still had his number blocked. Mac, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from right now. I wouldn't blame you if you deleted this without reading it, but I need to say some things whether you respond or not. I'm sorry. Not just for the wedding fiasco, but for everything. For the lies when we were kids. For standing by while Dad threw you out. For the years of silence after. For allowing them to target your home for my wedding even after you explicitly said no. The truth is, I've spent my whole life being the favored child, and it warped me. I watched how they treated you, and even though I knew it was wrong, I did nothing because it benefited me. I told myself it wasn't that bad, or that you were strong enough to handle it, or that maybe you really had done something to deserve it. All lies I used to absolve myself of responsibility. Seeing how far they were willing to go, showing up at your home with 200 people after you'd legally warned them not to, forced me to confront what I've been enabling all these years. They've never respected you as a person with your own rights and boundaries. And by going along with their plans, neither did I. Melissa has called off our engagement. She says she can't marry someone who would participate in such a massive violation of his own sister's boundaries. She's right. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I finally see the truth about our family dynamic, and I'm getting therapy to understand my role in it. Maybe someday I can be the kind of brother you deserved all along. Take care of yourself. Ryan. I set the phone down, unexpected tears blurring my vision. After years of denial and dismissal, someone from my family was finally acknowledging the reality of my experience. It wasn't my parents, the primary architects of the dysfunction, but it was something. You okay? Tara asked, noticing my emotion. I think so, I said, handing her my phone. It's from Ryan. She and Diego read the message together, their expressions serious. That's surprisingly self-aware. Diego commented when they finished. Do you think he means it? Tara asked cautiously. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to believe he's capable of this kind of growth. Another part remembers all the times he's played the penitent only when it served his interests. You don't have to decide how you feel about it right now, Diego reminded me. Or whether you want him in your life going forward. That's something you can think about when you're ready. I nodded, grateful for the reminder that I controlled the timeline of any potential reconciliation. We returned to Massachusetts the following week to find my property undisturbed and everything in order. The property manager reported no further attempts by my family to access the house. Local gossip had apparently been intense. Jessica called with reports that my parents had left town abruptly for an extended vacation after the wedding debacle. 2 weeks after our return, I met Catherine Thornton for coffee in a neutral location. She was elegant and forthright, apologizing again for her family's role in the situation and sharing additional details about how the deception had unfolded. Gerald had been effectively frozen out of wedding planning as punishment for his behavior. Melissa, while still hurt by Ryan's actions, Was considering meeting with him to discuss whether rebuilding trust was possible. Your brother seems genuinely remorseful, Catherine observed. Whether that's enough is entirely your decision. Of course. I'm taking things one day at a time, I told her. 34 years of family history doesn't get resolved overnight. Very wise, she nodded. For what it's worth. I admire how you handled the situation. Many people would have given into the pressure or created a scene. Your approach was remarkably dignified. After considerable thought, I responded to Ryan's message a month after returning home. Ryan, thank you for your apology. I appreciate your willingness to acknowledge the dynamics of our family and your role in them. That couldn't have been easy. I'm not ready for a relationship right now, but I'm not closing the door permanently either. I need time to process everything that's happened and determine what kind of boundaries would be necessary for me to feel safe having you in my life. If you're serious about therapy and understanding these patterns, that's a positive step. I've found it helpful in my own journey. Take care. Mackenzie. His reply was simple. I understand completely. Thank you for responding at all. The door is open whenever you're ready, on whatever terms you need. My parents eventually sent a letter, not an apology, but a stilted invitation to move forward as a family and put unfortunate misunderstandings behind us. I didn't respond. Some relationships couldn't be salvaged, and I had finally accepted that my parents might fall into that category. Their inability to acknowledge their actions or take responsibility for the hurt they'd caused made meaningful reconciliation impossible. As summer transitioned to fall, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this point. 12 years ago, I'd been thrown out of my childhood home with nothing but what fit in my car. Now, I owned a beautiful lakefront property that my parents had tried to appropriate for their golden child's wedding. The symmetry was striking, and so was the reversal of power. I had built my success without their support. I had created boundaries they couldn't cross. I had protected what was mine against their entitlement. Most importantly, I had finally freed myself from the desperate hope for their approval that had shadowed so much of my life. My home remained my sanctuary, not because it was perfect or expensive, but because it represented the life I had created on my own terms. The chosen family I had gathered around me during the crisis proved the truth I had been learning gradually over 12 years. Blood doesn't define family. Love, respect, and mutual support do. Some viewers might wonder if I made the right choice in taking such a hard line against my family's wedding plans. Was it worth potentially burning bridges to protect my property rights? Couldn't I have shown more flexibility for my brother's special day? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have maintained firm boundaries or tried to find a compromise? If you found value in my story, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps this community of survivors continue sharing experiences that remind us we're not alone in establishing healthy boundaries with difficult family members. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into.